Emotions Matter. Brought to you by emaw.com. That's EMAWW.com. Your solution for emotional intelligence. Thank you for joining me, your host, Monique, on the Emotions Matter podcast. I'm pleased to introduce my guest today, Mikko Alasaarela. Mikko is an entrepreneur and owner of InBot, which is a global community of people who help innovative B2B companies grow. Mikko is also the oldest of 10 children, with parents who were both researchers and who also earned their PhD. His father was also a startup entrepreneur and influenced the career path that Mikko took. In addition to the influences of his family, Mikko has also found inspiration in the writings of Stephen Kotler, Peter Diamond, as well as Max Tegmark and Harari. Mikko has lived in many countries and has started many companies all over the world. He has experimented with a wide range of technologies, including gaming, nanotechnology, and artificial intelligence. And now I'd like to welcome my guest, Mikko Alasaarela.
Hi, Monique. How is it in South Carolina today?
Oh, it's great. It's a little cloudy and rainy, but it still feels pretty good out here in the Carolinas. Tell me, Mikko, we'll just go ahead and jump right on in here. Where did you start developing your interest in artificial intelligence?
Wow, that's a long story. I started studying all kinds of things, also relating to artificial intelligence already when I was in my high school. So back from early 90s, and then continuing over the years, over the startups that I built, over all the studies that I made in the evening. I mean, always been interested in the future technologies in general, and quite broadly, not only artificial intelligence, but all kinds of other technologies as well. But of course, today, artificial intelligence is the most fundamentally disruptive and most important technology that we are creating as a humanity. It's the only technology that can transform what it means to be a human. And it's the only technology that can surpass us.
Wow, that's a big statement right there, and we're going to explore that a little bit more as we go on with our chat here. But tell us too about your startup company, InBot.
Yeah, so InBot is actually my 7th startup. So I founded 6 companies before this one. Was lucky enough to sell 3 of them. So have been doing this entrepreneur thing as a lifestyle and hobby, and also my life purpose. For most of my life, and since I graduated. And then this InBot is a culmination of all the learnings that I've had over the years. We started out to figure out how can we create a better business environment in general. Like I was looking at the marketing automation systems that were out there, and looking at all the sales tools and all the other things that people are using. And I came to the conclusion that all of the artificial intelligence that was built for sales and marketing were mostly focused on reaching out to people in large scale and scaling messaging, scaling communication. Of course, it also includes some nicer parts like behavioral targeting and so on. But at the end of the day, I saw most of the marketing automation to really be glorified spam. I mean, it was the system to scale communication without human being part of it. And I thought that was the wrong way of approaching developing a lot of businesses. If you look at lots of the businesses that are out there, they don't need to reach out to everybody. I mean, they have a limited set of potential clients that they can serve. And if they carefully approach those ones that are really relevant for their cause and build trust on the way, I mean, they would do much better. I mean, they would have less like residual spam sent to people because they don't approach people that are not relevant. If they build trust with the right guys, they can build a good reputation trail on the way when they're building their references. So that was a very important part of it. So we built this technology, which we call the people graph, which maps trust between people. I mean, that's a kind of like a broad statement, mapping trust. But how we do it is that we take the address books that people upload on our system, as well as all the other signals, communication signals that they share with us. We use that data to analyze based on communication patterns, based on job histories, based on overlaps in address books and other data signals. How likely is it that a person could be persuaded by this person when having a conversation? And this information we use to discover the right person to make an introduction for you as an entrepreneur to meet your clients. So if you want to reach out to, let's say, a chief information officer of Comcast, that would be a very high value target from any point of view. It would be almost impossibly hard to reach out to that person like that because there's so many people trying to reach out to the same person. Now, how do you get there? You get there by knowing one of their friends. And how do you know one of their friends? Of course, you don't know who are the closest friends. You may find out from LinkedIn or some other social network who are connected to this person. But being connected to a person doesn't mean that they are friends or they trust each other. So we try to discover these kind of signals and use that information to create a more, caring, trust-building way of growing businesses.
Wow, so you really help them develop a target audience and you save them a huge amount of time and legwork. You do the legwork for them, so that's great.
Yeah, so it's basically like as you see, when you cut off the marketing automation part of a sales funnel. I mean, for those listeners who don't understand like how CRM, the customer relationship management tools work, I mean, they create what they call the sales pipeline. And the sales pipeline has usually multiple steps, in the CRM system. And oftentimes there's like anywhere between 10 to 15 steps on the prospecting phase, which people are going through to qualify leads to prospects leads to qualified leads to prospects to the then negotiation and then to clients. And in our case, we try to cut off the whole front part of of the pipeline, and then only leave them the negotiation and conversion phase, simplifying the lies, removing the spam, and making the whole business world a more trustworthy place to be in.
Yeah, that creates a real positive environment for your client. Like I said, a lot of time and money gets wasted on what you were talking about earlier, and you're kind of saving them that time and money, and I think that's great.
It's not only time and money. It's also saving the negative emotions that people are receiving as a sales guys, like getting rejected and getting accused from spamming and getting accused of pestering people. We literally make the sales guys or the founders who are selling, in this case, their lives much, much better. It's like so much more fun to work when you are building from position of trust.
Yeah, so it's like introducing them at a party.
Yeah, so
you skip the party, but it's that same feeling, X
exactly.
meet Y, yeah, and you guys would get along well, right? Mm-hmm. No, I think that's great. Tell me, I was reading your site, and this expression came up, and I wanted you to explain a little bit. Can you tell us what does investing in exponential technologies to create a, quote, healthier future means?
Yeah. So if we, Peter Diamandis is one of those guys who talks a lot about exponential technologies. And there's of course Ray Kurzweil and others. One of the things that how I see the world is that we have in our hands quite disruptive technologies in the form of artificial intelligence and as well as cryptocurrencies. And with these technologies, it's possible. I say cryptocurrencies instead of blockchain because blockchain is just one way of implementing a cryptocurrency. You can implement it also in other ways. But when you look at these technologies, lots of it so far has been basically applied to feed the human greed. And if you look at it from that angle, disruptions that they are causing are not being applied to the general betterment of humanity, but it's mostly being applied to enrich a very small group of elite investors and elite entrepreneurs. I see this as a bad trend because I don't see the governments being able to really serve us in this environment. They are too slow to make moves when disruptive technologies hit. I mean, any government that anybody observes is not going to be able to change like in 2 years or 1 year or like in this kind of time frames that is necessary with technologies like artificial intelligence. Like, I mean, if any disruption is introduced, it may take many years before some kind of remedy or solution has been implemented on the governmental level. So I see that it's up to benevolent entrepreneurs, which I consider myself to be one, who actually care about the future of humanity and how these technologies are going to affect us, and try to apply these technologies so that the humanity has a better future. So let's take an example. Like, I mean, Elon Musk, of course, wants us to go to Mars and do all these other plans, but let's take examples of universal basic income or universal free healthcare. I mean, those are the kind of concepts that are currently possible to implement with cryptocurrencies and artificial intelligence. I mean, it's not possible to implement it right away, but you can create a viable path going forward, implementing such services to people. So who is taking responsibility of building those? Like, who wants to build those? I mean, is there any people who care enough about their kind that they would implement such things? And that's something that I'm advocating. I mean, I'm advocating entrepreneurs to think big, in terms of making impact, not thinking big in terms of just aggregating as much money as possible to a very few people.
Mm-hmm. Can you explain what you mean by disruptive technologies, and why do you consider artificial intelligence to be a part of that?
Yeah, so disruptive technologies are technologies that like end a way of doing things, like that put an end of something that has existed. So let's take self-driving car. I mean, it puts an end to professional drivers. That's a very disruptive technology, because previously you have millions of human beings who are driving a car for profession as taxi drivers and truck drivers and so on. And suddenly they are not needed, or they are not even wanted, because the self-driving cars are safer, more efficient. They are less of those are needed to run on the streets. So once we have that technology fully implemented, we have a new reality where we don't have drivers. I mean, that's disruptive in my definition.
Do you think that's possible? Do you think that scenario is truly possible? And if so, is that a skill set that nobody would ever need to learn again, about learning how to drive?
It's not only possible, but it's inevitable. So it's going to happen, and it's going to happen with such a certainty that I mean, the only thing that prevents that from happening at this point is some kind of like disaster that ends the humankind, like with nuclear disaster or something like this. If we don't have this, no like scenario does not take us to that place anymore.
That's very fascinating. And so why do you think then it is important for people to embrace artificial intelligence? Because you realize there's a huge distrust about that.
I mean, so here's the thing. The artificial intelligence is happening. So because it's happening, like there's lots of developers out there. There's like thousands and thousands and thousands of developers whose job is to create algorithms that are going to manipulate you, are going to addict you, are going to make you pay money for something, are choosing your restaurants you go to, are choosing the life partner that you are going to live with, are choosing the road that you are going to take when you drive, when you're still driving, are choosing a lot of other things, like the best route to fly to some place. All of these decisions are already being made for us. And we are totally happy with it because the artificial intelligence behind it is doing better judgments and better decisions than we can do. Now we're going towards this direction. We don't even realize how much our life already depends on them. Whether we embrace it or not, like, I mean, you can say that, okay, I don't believe in artificial intelligence. What you don't realize is that your life is completely manipulated by artificial intelligence already. So what you need to do is you need to wake up and understand that. I mean, I'm not saying that you should resist that because, as I said, as long as the artificial intelligences are making better decisions for you than you can do yourself, you're probably benefiting from it. So if we now look at the AIs that are already such a big part of our lives in so many places and so many applications, so many different choices that you are making on a daily basis, we need to think about this benevolent aspect of it. Can we create algorithms that are not just addicting you to, let's say, play this MMO game for 10 hours a day and paying all your extra income to this company for these virtual goods in the game? Why couldn't you use the same energy and same development efforts that are now doing that and manipulating people to do this and making billions of money to some enrich a few very rare entrepreneurs? Why couldn't you use that same artificial intelligence to solve real problems like providing universal free healthcare? I think it's a opportunity for somebody who actually wants to help to start building systems that provide artificial intelligence based healthcare for everybody for free.
How do you think people really feel? You know, we talk a lot about emotional intelligence on our podcast. So when you think about the feelings that are wrapped around that, what do you see? What is that feeling that people have, you know, towards artificial intelligence, both on maybe the positive end and as well as the negative end?
I mean, there's two things. Like, there's this, how do I say, like the publicly visible reaction when people talk about artificial intelligence and its in its effects. So let's say when somebody says to you that artificial intelligence is going to end your job, your reaction is probably negative, and you probably say that no, never, it's not going to happen. It's probably going to happen to the others, but not to me. I mean, that's the kind of denial response that people would say. And but then there's the other aspect of artificial intelligence, especially the artificial emotional intelligence, which is the hidden manipulation that happens in the background. I mean, all these algorithms that are optimized to engage you, but they may actually be at the same time radicalizing you as a person. Let's take an example. You go into YouTube. YouTube has an algorithm that's sole target is to engage you, to stay as long as possible on watching those YouTube videos. Well, what happens is that the human psyche works in a way that if you want to stay as long as possible, a person to stay as long as possible watching those YouTube videos, you have to deliver them a little bit more radical stuff every time so that they stay a little bit on the edge. Because if you deliver them the same stuff over and over, they will get bored and move on. So in order to keep them on the edge, let's say that you get something, some content that is, let's say, anti-establishment Republican content. Let's like as an example. And then the next one is a little bit more edgy, and the next one is a little bit more edgy. Over time, the algorithm that was optimized for your engagement may have made you into radical alt-right person. And same could work on the other side, like going from like relatively moderate left-wing guy into complete radical alt-left. And these kind of things have been proven to happen. I mean, if you look at the American political scene today, don't you think that there's a huge hole in the center? This is actually a result of people spending time with algorithms that are radicalizing them. And they don't know that. And even the algorithms don't try to do that.
Sounds like then if I was to label it with an actual feeling, I would say that people are, number one, fearful of artificial intelligence because of the manipulative possibilities there based on what you are describing.
My point is that people don't feel anything about it because they don't understand that they are being manipulated. Most people don't understand this. I mean, as I said, you may have some positions on publicly about artificial intelligence, but what you don't know is that the artificial intelligence is manipulating your emotional responses a lot, and they're regulating a lot of your behavior. And you don't know it. You have no idea because it happens so subtly. I mean, I was telling about this algorithm that's only goal is to engage you, but it radicalizes you. I mean, you change as a person as a result of algorithms, but you don't know it. You don't realize it.
So where is the morality? Where do we, when we think of human versus machine, I mean, is morality what differs between us?
Yeah, I mean, of course, like if you talk about artificial intelligence, there's a common misconception that, I mean, because of the movies and because the way we portray the artificial intelligence, that artificial intelligence has some kind of artificial consciousness, and this is important to understand that currently we do not have any artificial intelligence that has any kind of consciousness. The consciousness of artificial intelligence can happen, and it can be an emergent factor from the complexity of the algorithms that are being built. So it can at some point be reality, but today it's not. So any artificial intelligence that you deal with today, which is manipulating you, it's just implementing a goal-oriented behavior. And then this goal-oriented behavior is being passed on to you, and it gets you to do something. It may have been optimized to keep you engaged or keep you doing something that the designers of the algorithms originally wanted you to, like maximize engagement or monetization, whatever it is, that drives your behavior towards those goals. But as a side result, can cause also some other things, as I mentioned earlier.
So is there an ethical responsibility then, and how do you make sure that the developers are approaching this in an ethical way?
This is one of the biggest questions of our time, in my opinion. So I'm calling for the benevolent entrepreneurs out there to build AIs that actually try to do something good, because I think right now today, vast majority of the algorithms that we are building are just trying to make money, or trying to manipulate people for behaviors like purchase or commercial behaviors that are benefiting some bottom line of some commercial companies that are trying to aggregate all the fiat currencies to the hands of as few as possible. So I mean, I'm an entrepreneur and I'm a capitalist myself, but I dislike the fact that artificial intelligence is not being applied for more benevolent goals, because, as I said, I don't believe that the governments of today, the nation states today, are able to react to this change that we are facing fast enough to really create a environment that is good for everybody. And on the same hand, AI can provide us, I mean, what Peter Diamandis, for example, says, the abundance. I mean, it can provide so much good in so many levels that we can have abundance for everybody. It's possible. But do we want it? I mean, do people actually just want the abundance for themselves and not to anybody else? I mean, if people really care about providing abundance for everybody, then we could benefit from the AI on the big scale as a whole humanity.
Let me go back to a kind of a previous line of thinking we were going with. Let me ask you, do you think, and if artificial intelligence does replace jobs, as you said, that it probably will, it has been already. For example, just on the internet level, I mean, newspapers, the hard copy of papers are disappearing. It's just like the printing press, it's a dying art form, and now it's mostly electronic. What would happen then to all of the people at this point if artificial intelligence actually, took over most of our livelihood? What would people do? What would our society look like, in your opinion?
Yeah, so there are multiple scenarios that people have been discussing that are possible. One is what Yuval Noah Harari has shared in his book Homo Deus, highly recommended book, by the way. So what he says is that one scenario is that a large portion of humans will move into virtual realities, which are going to be so real that you don't see the difference between the base reality and the virtual reality. And when you get to a point where the virtual reality gives you the same level of satisfaction in most of these things that you do, then what it will offer you is that it will offer you any kind of scenario that you want to play out. So let's say that you want to become a queen in a kingdom of the medieval ages. You can be one. If you want to be an astronaut, you can be one too. You want to be some caveman in the history, you can be that. If you want to be like I said, roaming the space as some kind of like cyborg, you can be that too. You want to be a famous singer, you can be that. So now that becomes so addictive, as an option to the base reality, which is probably relatively dull compared to these virtual realities, that vast majority of the humanity will end up spending most of their time in those virtual realities, living whatever dreams they have. I mean, that sounds like I don't know, almost corny, but it makes sense. It makes sense to me.
Well, what you're describing is that movie a few years back called WALL-E, where they traveled around in a spaceship and everybody had some kind of, headset or something they were tuned into. Nobody communicated with each other. Everything was literally fed to them. They just laid there and, became overweight, unmotivated, and they just kind of lived in this state of virtual happiness of the fantasy world, and to the point where all your senses and natural God-given, instincts and motor skills and everything is no longer, needed.
Oh yeah, so I mean, of course that's one scenario. People have been saying that we will invent ourselves something to do because we always did, but that's actually not true. Humanity has had this concept of jobs actually for a very short period of time. Vast majority of the history is about humans doing something only to survive. Like, I mean, hunting animals to have food, and building shelters to not to die, in some attack of animals or something like this, and or dying from cold, when there's a cold night. We did things that were mostly like done out of preservation. Beyond that, there was no need to do anything. Like, I mean, you could do whatever you wanted. This whole like specialized professions idea is a relatively recent emerging idea. And who knows, maybe we go back into some times when we don't have to have this kind of like specialist roles for everybody to do some specific function in the society. Maybe we'll have a vast majority of people who do whatever they want or do nothing or like die out of hunger because the rich guys are so greedy that they don't want to share. I don't know. Like, I mean, there's these different scenarios that can play out, but it doesn't have to be a scenario where everybody's working in the same way as we do today.
So is it going backwards then in evolution? Because that scenario sounds like we would we've evolved to a certain point. Have we peaked and now we're going to go backwards? It has a very, I keep thinking of, the Hunger Games, for example. But that was more for, again, like you were saying, this society that made other people work for them, right? But they put them in those games to survive.
So I don't see us going backwards unless we start killing each other again in a mass scale. What I see is that the artificial intelligence I don't see any reason why AI development will stop. So I always have this conversation when people say that, hey, why are you always saying that this AI will take over? Like, it won't take over. I was like, okay, let's take this curve. The human intelligence has been increasing by 3 IQ points a decade for the last 100 years. So we are evolving as species. We are becoming a little bit more intelligent every decade. Okay. At the same time, the computer intelligence has doubled in its power every 2 years. I mean, the Moore's law. And now you put those curves together. Like, I mean, yes, we may be still far from the crossing point, but not that far anymore. According to some research studies, the artificial intelligence in year 2015 was at the level of 4-year-old kid. How far are we from there to have the AI win us on like everything, like being on the super intelligence status? I mean, we just continue on our path. We don't even have to accelerate the growth, even though it does accelerate all the time as of now. let's say that these humans are really good at linear thinking and not very good at exponential ideas. I say to people, okay, let's give it to you. Let's not think about the exponential ideas because it seems to be hard to comprehend. Let's go with the linear curve. The thing is that the linear curve is already almost vertical as well. The current linear curve, how rapidly we are increasing and doubling the information in the world. Like we're creating, what I understood that we're creating every year information that is about the same as the whole history of humanity. And then if you have this kind of curve going up, there will be a point when it goes past the human intelligence. And then when that happens, then humans are not needed. Because why would you employ a human when you have an AI that does a better job? And so now you have to rethink like the role of a human in that place. I mean, we can become pets, we can become like I said, living a life of leisure, or we can merge with the technology itself. If we merge with the technology, we have to understand that if we connect ourselves to the internet and become part of the kind of like the global consciousness of the internet, we will lose ourselves. It's impossible for you to merge with internet and not at the same time lose your connection to your body. The fact that we are isolated beings and we only communicate via words like we are doing now makes us feel individual. I mean, if I saw everything that you saw, I mean, why would we be different beings anymore?
So, well, okay, let me take you in this direction then. Is there anything a human can do that you think a machine would never be able to do?
You could say that being human, but
what does that mean? What does being human mean?
Yeah, I mean, the question is that if you use biological machines to construct a human from scratch, I mean, maybe that's also like able to do with machines. Depends on what you define as a machine. I don't see why we would have anything unique. I mean, I understand that lots of people think that we have this thing called the soul, and if we have some kind of like spiritual thinking about ourselves. I mean, I can relate with people who want to think that, and I can relate. I said I have lots of religious friends. I grew up in a religious family myself. I mean, I'm not religious anymore, but I do see that there's a big correlation between like a religious person and the wish that humans stay somehow unique in this universe, and I respect that. I mean, it's okay. But I don't see why humans will stay unique or uniquely special, because the AI can easily become much bigger than us.
But that soul that you're talking about, separate from a religious perspective, is also filled with emotions, and those emotions come from, certain experiences, some learned, some felt, and I wonder, can machines ever really feel an emotion versus because you've programmed them to feel it? Can they ever genuinely feel?
Yeah, so this is something that Max Tegmark, who is a professor at the MIT on the Future of Light Institute, the head of the Future of Light Institute, he wrote a book called Life 3.0, and he of course like he surfaces this. I mean, in the same way, by the way, like Yuval Noah Harari has also been like he's the professor of at the Jerusalem University who wrote two really good books about the history and future of humanity. The history was the Sapiens, and then the future was Homo Deus. Both of these authors, as well as many others that I've read, have been pointing out that at the end of the day, the feelings that we have can be deciphered as algorithms, biological ones, as responses to specific things. They have evolved over the like millenniums when humans have evolved. Initially, they have evolved via like biological evolution, which is basically mostly that no being that was existing really learned much, but because of this natural selection, they became better, like because they're survival of the fittest. Once we got the skill of communication, which we got as as the first species in a proper way on this planet, we were able to start educating ourselves. And this communication enabled us to configure ourselves to be better at what we are. Like, it enabled us to educate and teach ourselves to learn new things. And this accelerated the evolution. But so it's kind of like a combination of our like research and learnings, as well as the cultural evolution that happened via the communication, that shaped us much faster during the past like thousands of years. And this skill of language has accelerated us a lot. And now what we are doing as the next step is that we are creating a new substrate for life. So we are basically saying that, okay, we can configure our own software, like our brain, by educating ourselves, but we cannot really configure much, at least in a huge way, our own hardware, which is our body, which is still a result of the evolution. So now if we create new life forms that are outside these restrictions that our body gives us, there's nothing that prevents that life form to exist, and nothing that prevents it to become more intelligent than us, and nothing that prevents it from learning to relate with us, via emotions. Coming back to your comment about the soul and emotions, that's a very important point, because when I was conversing with my father, who is both, as I said, scientist but also religious man, so he said to me when I was a kid, he said that your faith is in your heart, in metaphorically speaking, of course. It's in your emotional layer, not in your rational side. Your rational thinking is scientific, and it follows the laws of physics and natural sciences. But when it comes to anything faith related, it doesn't exist in that layer. It exists in your emotional layer. And so connecting the soul with emotions, like that was very important point for him, and I internalized it as a kid. I thought, okay, this is very interesting. Like you don't have to think about any faith-related issues with your rational self. You basically let it feel out, via emotions, and that made sense when I was a kid. Then I started studying emotional intelligence, and that kind of broke, because I wanted to cross between the rational self and the emotional self. I didn't want to compartmentalize them anymore, and this was when how do I say, like, my path to becoming agnostic. But it was important to understand that, because I get that, I understand this concept of looking from emotions and soul as like one thing.
That's very fascinating. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. So tell me then, based on the different entrepreneurs that you've dealt with, perhaps, or just seeing in the market here, what do you think some of the current struggles are between detection technologies, emotional detection technologies? What are some of the struggles that you see? And are they mostly, how do they recognize, besides the algorithms? Is there facial recognition happening? Is it through the speech? Or any other biological metrics that are used that help technology be able to detect emotions?
Yeah, so that's a good. I mean, one of the things that we need to understand, like, so video image is basically a machine's way of seeing. Audio is the machine's way of hearing. The touch screens on the sensors, like on the body, I mean, those are providing the sense of touch, as well as some additional data points that come without our interaction for the machines. I mean, we haven't developed like the taste and smell that far on these things, but they are actually not that relevant in terms of capturing information, because vast majority of the information that we digest and process ourselves comes through audiovisual and sometimes through touch. So having these senses already available to the machines can start interpreting everything that we do. So in terms of data, the biggest struggle that has been with the data has been that the machine learning algorithms have been the early phase machine learning algorithms have required a huge amount of data to be able to decipher some information out of these video images. So you basically have to educate these algorithms with a lot of data to make them work properly. However, that's being changed now, as there's been multiple projects that have had breakthroughs now in very recent times. Like during the last few weeks, we have had news of projects that have been able to learn much faster. Let's take an example of this Google's announcement that they basically created a new algorithm out of scratch that had absolutely no human bias and had no human inputs, that learned to play the game of Go from scratch with no like other inputs than the goals. And then after 3 days of machine learning with 4 TensorFlow processors instead of like the 48 that they used in the previous generation of the product, they beat the previous generation algorithm by 100 nil. And this kind of learning, that, like you're saying, a 10 times more efficient learning process, like 10 times faster learning process, and then no guidance and goals, and you have 100 nil beating of the previous algorithm. So I see that we are now coming to a time where it's possible now to do facial recognition with the smartphone like graphics processor. I actually discussed with one project that can do facial recognition using artificial intelligence algorithms that process directly within the hardware of the phone and not even using internet connection. Of course, you have to provide the information from the internet first for it to be able to do any matching. But if that information is available, it can do the matching in real time. Yeah, I mean, we are coming to new times when lots of these problems that we had are starting to go away.
So again, though, what it sounds like to me is that, yes, it can recognize the face, but can it recognize the emotion? And now here's the trick, and here's maybe where I can draw a distinction between the human mind versus the computer mind or the artificial intelligence, is that humans have instinct. And so, for example, I might smile at you and you might see that, as joy. And you might say, oh, she's happy to see me. But we all know we can smile a fake smile and I may not be happy to see you. But the computer, how would they even be able to pick that up? That comes from instinct. That comes from taking the whole picture, the voice, the micro burst in the eye, the amount of squint in the eye, you know what I mean? The body language, all of that comes into play with us sensing, oh, he doesn't really like me. He's just, putting up a front to like me.
Yeah, so the machines have the like 2 benefits over us. Like, okay, so first of all, let's talk about the instinct for a very short while. So instinct is basically subconscious processing of our brain. It's something that happens without you actively thinking about it. But that's evolution's product for our brains, basically making it more efficient for us to act in situations. For example, when we see a cat, like we instantly know it's a cat without doing any kind of more processing or so on. In the same way, like you see like smirk, in the face, you can draw conclusions already from that with your instincts. It's actually not that hard to program those instincts to machines as well. The benefit that the machines have over humans is that when you talk about these large companies like Facebook and Google, they have way more background information about the person than you have, and they can memorize everything that the person has ever done in his life or her life, and then having this kind of perspective and then having the emotions on the face and then mapping it back to everything else, it has huge head start against us. I mean, of course, we haven't done it in scale because it's still like quite expensive to process these kind of things with the current machine learning algorithms. So it's not like super cost efficient to start like analyzing everybody's facial reactions everywhere in the world. However, if you wanted to, I don't see any obstacles anymore for the machines to really intuitively understand us. I mean, the intuition that we have, like in the instincts that we have, that's just subconscious processing in the brain. Nothing in such a way extraordinary that the machines cannot learn the same thing.
I am truly fascinated by our conversation, but I do have a caller that has an interesting question for you that, again, might, I'm just going to challenge you here on this, that might distinguish us between being human and being artificial intelligence. Now this is Jake from Ohio, and he's actually looks like he's working on a device himself that helps regulate a person's sleep cycle, and he hopes to actually record dreams. So it looks like somebody could actually be able to revisit their dreams, not just in memory, but to have some, you know, hardcore component to that. And he's in the process of trying to build a prototype. So good luck to him for that. And he, wants to start it on humans. And he is curious about you. He wants to know if you could offer him any advice as a developer. What are some of the steps he might need to do to get his product, fully realized?
Well, it's a tall order. Of course, we've seen already some science labs deciphering images out of human brain just by analyzing the brain like electromagnetic fields in the brain. My brother-in-law was working at the company in Finland called Nextim as one of the chief hardware engineers, and he was like they built this helmet that analyzes your brain waves so accurately that you can start feeding back information via this device. So he said that he could move his hand from a command line in a computer by feeding information directly to his brain. I'm like, wow, that sounds crazy. Like, I mean, so you basically say to the computer, move my hand, and then your hand moves. Like, how does it feel? And he's like, well, it feels like this kind of compulse, because you did not intend it to happen. It just happened because the brain said so. And but when that happened already many years ago. So now look at all these devices that are able to measure and interact with our brain waves. Anything is possible. I mean, from that angle, looking at the commercial applications of this. Of course, now I would say that it sounds to me more like a scientific project at this point. But if you look at the commercial applications, I could see in the further future a very nice application of recording some of those streams and implementing a virtual world around those streams, so that you can basically use the dream as a specification for the virtual world that is created to you. So you can go into that virtual world and live your dream and and interact with it, So making it I mean, you could call it a lucid dream, but you can make it reality, actual experienced reality.
And would he come to see someone like you then, if he was interested on developing this further?
Yeah, so I mean, I could point him to multiple people who are working in this industry. I know actually another company based in Poland that is doing the same thing. Like the founder, and I know a bunch of folks in the industry. I'm not personally involved in it myself, so because it's a kind of like a combination of hardware and software that you need to implement. Of course, you don't have to use your own hardware. I would say that it's a tall order. You need to have lots of funding and lots of risk taking capability. Like Elon Musk is taking these risks, and I think everybody appreciates him for doing that. I think we need more people like Elon.
Mm-hmm. So tell me, it sounds like you would probably agree to this question, that it is possible then for us to develop some kind of device, wearable device, that could not only identify our emotional states, but perhaps even change it?
I think it will be a combination of a wearable device and some other inputs, like maybe a smartphone that has all the data about us already saved, or has a visual via the camera to our face and stuff like this. So I think wearables definitely can augment the information about their emotional state and everything else. I'm not sure if it makes sense as a standalone thing. I think it's a combination of all the sensors that we have around us. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, because let's say somebody who has a tendency to be angry all the time or violent, that if there was a device that could calm them or turn that into joy or tenderness.
Yeah, but of course, we could do this kind of Pavlov dog type of things that, you recognize enough anger, from a pulse and sweat levels and some measurements, and then you release some kind of a drug or something that calms that person down. I mean, that could be a useful system for like mental asylums, for example. But for normal everyday use, let's say that you are in a meeting. It would be kind of nice if all the devices around you that are measuring your situation, listening to you speak, and everything else would give you like a slight nudge, let's say a small vibration in a wearable device that hey, now you're going out of like a desirable realm, or maybe. What do you think? Like,
I'm just imagining like if I wore something like that, it'd probably be beeping all the time.
It doesn't have the beep. It can kind of like tickle you.
Vibrate,
like,
yeah.
I screwed up again.
Oh, that's great. It's just like a little touch point, like just kind of reminding you, hey, I love it. Call it the nudge device. So,
by the way, I had a human version of that when I was a young entrepreneur. I had like a professor of the UCSD, like in San Diego.
Yeah.
And he is a professor of entrepreneurship, and he was my mentor. And we went to lots of meetings in the United States when I was, like I said, in my mid-20s, and I was in business meetings with much more experienced guys. And we had this like system where he would signal me with specific things like rubbing his nose or like squeezing his ear or something when I was going out of control. And then when I see him doing that, like I just stopped and gave the like talk to him for a moment. Then he inserted something, whatever he inserted in the middle, and then I continued from a much like different position. But the whole thing is that we always prepared the meetings like by agreeing on that, and then like agreeing what our targets were, and then analyzing after the meeting what went wrong and what we did right. And it was really, really good way of learning.
I loved it. That is fabulous. So tell us, Mikko, what's your plans for the future, and how can we learn more about you?
So I mean, of course, I plan to stay entrepreneur, and build. My target for InBot is that our vision for this company is that we want to provide a human opportunity in the age of artificial intelligence. And what that means is that I mentioned to you earlier about these benevolent entrepreneurs trying to create human opportunity with all what AI does. This is my play on that field. I want to create a system that makes, first of all, uses algorithms to make us behave better. As I said, building trust rather than spamming people. And using the proceeds of this help that yields income for these companies, which may or may not be greedy in themselves. From our cost point of view, it doesn't matter. These companies can be in business just for making money for something else. But when these AI companies are taking over the world that we are helping, we are in the process building a fund that can provide this human opportunity for a long time to come. So I'm hoping that we can build something that provide millions of people like meaningful existence together with AIs. I hope we succeed.
Give us a contact.
Yeah, so you can reach out to me at mikko@inbot.io. It's my email, and I would love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm quite active there. I actually write about and I post about like the emotionally intelligent AIs quite often. So on LinkedIn, you can find me with my name, Mikko Alasaarela. It's a unique name. There's no second me. So if you manage to spell this name, you will find me.
See that, Mikko? You are an individual. You are human. And I want to thank Mikko again for joining me today. And I want to thank you for joining me, your host, Monique, on the Emotions Matter podcast.